What are you doing this weekend?
Hanging out.
Where?
Yard work.
Yard work? That sounds terrible.
No, we were talking about solo cups.
What color?
Red.
Red what?
Red.
Red.
Solo cups.
Red Solo Cup. There are going to be a lot of red Solo Cups out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Not my trademark, so I don't want to claim it.
Can we get Solo to make checkered flag Solo cups?
That would be pretty awesome. We have checkered flag toothpicks for which you can insert your into your olives and your limes and whatever other accoutrement you want in your drink of choice. Mine in particular is a Bloody Mary with Zing Zang Bloody Mary mix.
100%.
Send me royalty checks. Or just a free bottle of Zing Zang would be amazing because
that's what I forgot. Set Zing Zang bottle on the counter. All right, next time.
All right, so Todd family tradition. We've had Indianapolis 500 race tickets in our family since the 1940s. So our traditions are similar to a lot of other families out there.
I was not alive then, just for the record.
That's true. And obviously I wasn't either since I am the younger brother. Please note that on the record. And we currently have 20 seats. We have a core group of families and friends that have been going with us for many, many years. This will be, if you include, let me rephrase, if you exclude last year, because Doug Bowles, the president of IMS, gave everyone a pass. Last year did not count towards breaking of any streaks. So in our family, you have to be 9 years old to go to the race. Why 9? I have no idea. It's a completely arbitrary number.
And as a kid, that was like, this is BS. Like,
it was torture,
why?
Especially when you're 8, because you're like, what the heck's the difference between 8 and 9? Like, let me go to the race. So in 1987, that was my first race. So do the math. 30 years and 17, 18, 19, that's 32. 20 doesn't count. So this would be my 33rd race consecutive, again, last year not counting, which is symbolic with 33 starting drivers in the field, 32 men, 1 woman. Would like to see more women. Don't know where Pippa was at, but would love to see her get a ride. And
Milka?
And no Milka. No fine driver that she is. And no Lotus engines, thankfully.
Yeah.
So we're very much looking forward to getting back at it this weekend as the world comes back to life, somewhat post-pandemic, narrow end of the funnel pandemic. So I'm pretty psyched, to say the least.
It's going to be a good one. I mean, yesterday's qualifications, Fast 9, the 9 cars going into that, I think were separated by just over half a mile an hour.
Something like that.
Made it pretty competitive.
Yeah, I think going down the backstretch and hitting 237-ish, flat out diving into a corner is something that I would love to have the opportunity to do. And if given the opportunity, would probably completely chicken out.
You can try it.
That would be cool. Maybe 180. Not sure what that feels like.
Yeah. Even 125 going around there in the Chevy Impala, you feel it. Granted, It's an Impala, but...
Was it like a 78 Impala with big rims and some ground effects?
No ground effects, no hydraulics.
Oh, you weren't hitting switches.
No. We are recording. Holy crap. Well, might as well get rolling.
All right. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm Vince Todd, for the record.
And again, I am Joe Todd.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Industrious Podcast. Happy to be here. Glad to get this thing rolling finally. Excited about it. This is one of our, I'll call it pandemic projects.
There were a lot of pandemic projects.
Yes, that's just true. Before we get into the pandemic conversation, which I'm sure people are starting to get tired of, but it's worth noting for sure. Let's talk about where everything began for us in this business when we decided to get industrious. How's that for
I was waiting for angels to sing.
I know for me, I actually, so I was working for another company that distributes or was distributing at the time cable modems, DSL modems. If you guys, anybody remembers those, growing pretty rapidly. This is before the tech bubble burst of the early 2000s, and received a call from Dad about a product line that he was coming on board with and needed someone to manage that. And, I was happy at the time, but there was something about that idea that was kind of ingrained in us, with even going back to our high school days when Mom had the frozen yogurt shops, about doing your own thing or having your own thing or being part of something that you had a stake in. And so when he called and we talked about it, for me, it was almost a no-brainer. Now, did I think I was going to go sell paint for a living? No, but I think when your name's on the door, so to speak, I don't want to say the product's irrelevant, but it kind of is, at least to me. That was in January of 2002 when I officially started up with what was then Paints and Solvents.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say no one enters the coatings industry willingly. They sort of get sucked in, and then once you're in, you're never getting out. It's sort of an inside joke amongst a lot of people within the paint world, and it's a true stereotype because once you're in, you're locked. I think my story is somewhat similar in how entering the industry, and that it's a family business, and with the family business comes a lot of guilt trips. So for me, it's May 24th, race week in Indy, but also graduation time of year. So a lot of colleges and universities in throughout the country, and particularly here in the Midwest, are going through their graduation ceremonies. So I look back many, many years ago, graduating from Indiana University, go Hoosh, and as my kids think, the only college choice in the country. Or as my oldest would say, Dad, I wish IU had a suggestion box because I'd like to leave a note in it that they start an engineering program because I really want to be an engineer, but I don't want to go to Purdue. He's a smart kid on multiple levels. I graduated from IU with what I thought was my dream job, moving to Cincinnati and working for Procter & Gamble. And off I went to Cincy, to the Queen City, home of the Big Red Machine and some sort of football team, apparently. And not that long into my tenure there did I realize that I am not wired to be a big corporate guy. I did not like the corporate culture. Nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't suited for me. And then at the time, between family members, that one sitting across the table from me and Vince, and then also our mom, were both going through treatment for cancer, and my then girlfriend, now wife, at that time the writing was on the wall, was living in Indy. So there were a lot of pulls back to Naptown. And when I did come back, our father, who had purchased a division of another company, the coatings division, and made it his own, sort of on me to come join the family business. Vince had just joined not too long before, and I think he saw it as sort of his dream and his succession and sort of the painting he had had in his mind that we were all in on this business, and I was not ready for that yet. So I got a job here in Indy, but then, monthly, it was like ping, ping, ping. And finally, I think as the youngest child of the family, being the pleaser, finally I relented to what I call the guilt trip and got sucked in. And but to Vince's point, when it's your name on the door, and you build a team around you that some of which have been with us for a long time and are more than just people you work with. You create these long-lasting relationships. All the sweat equity that goes into building something, you really take a lot of pride and care for what you got there. It's almost like having another child, but it just talks back a little bit less than an actual child.
Yeah, I would agree with that comment. So fast forwarding, that was, what year was that? Was that 2004?
I'd like not to comment on what year it was because I don't want to age myself, or maybe because I just don't remember.
Okay, it was the early 2000s. How's that? Ish.
Yes.
So then I would say, and correct me where I'm wrong, 05, 06-ish, we were more or less handling a lot of the day-to-day. But I vividly remember, kind of fast forwarding here a little bit, of course, the 08, 09 Great Recession was an interesting time for not just us, but everyone, clearly. I would say that was the NBA by experience for a lot of people. The entire industry shrank massively.
Yeah.
We had to make some very difficult decisions, like most other businesses did. And so it was a tough time, but we weathered that storm and got through it and have grown ever since.
Yeah, I won't forget that. I think we still have emotional scars from that period of time for our business, as well as, like you said, a lot of really anyone industry wide and on a broader scale. The nationally and globally, the economic impact for us. A lot of difficult decisions were made, but with that gray cloud with silver lining, in that it caused us to really reshuffle the deck. The famous book by Jack Welch, Good to Great, you could pick out a lot of lines out of that. And
I think it was Collins.
Huh?
I think it was Collins.
What did I say?
You said Jack Welch.
Oh,
the old
G's. Yeah.
CEO.
Well, yes, you're right. I think you're right. Sorry. Anyway. I'm getting old. I can't remember a lot. But not as old as you. So it caused us to reshuffle the deck. And as the saying goes, you have so many seats on the bus and you have so many people that can fit on that bus. You've got to determine who belongs on the bus in the first place and who doesn't. And unfortunately, you've got to remove some people from the bus. And then those who you have left, you've got to figure out, okay, where do they sit? Where's the best seat for them, not only for them, but also for the company overall. And you do your best to make that match. And that caused us to really, like I said, reshuffle the deck. And when I remember it was April, I believe it was April of 2009, someone somewhere flipped a switch and all the machines, all the assembly lines came back on. And while it didn't go right back to, 100 miles an hour at once, that's when things started picking back up. And fortunately for us, we were well suited and ready to take that on. And I think if you fast forward to what we've gone through the last year plus with the pandemic and where we were a year ago, in May of 2020, going April of 2020, when internally we had what we called Project Greenlight. And that was, I don't want to get too deep into this, but we've got a lot of downtime. We had a lot of our markets were shut down or significantly slower from a daily business standpoint, where we said, okay, at some point we've seen this movie before. At some point, someone's going to come in and say, green light, go, and we need to be ready for it. So sometimes the lessons you learn during the really challenging times, you don't see it in that moment, but looking back, not that I want to go through a Great Recession again, but looking back, you can see where it strengthened us for sure.
Yeah. Did McConaughey get his idea for his new book, Green Lights, from our project?
Yes, and
we'll
actually
have to have a conversation with him.
Well, he sent a check. You didn't get your.
I missed my portion of that.
Well, all right.
So we're going back real quick I think it was before the Great Recession. I can't remember if it was 05, but when we had some time to start really thinking about the 50,000 foot view, the company name at that time was Paints and Solvents.
Terrible.
And for a whole host of reasons, we weren't big fans of that. So that is when we went through the project of basically rebranding or renaming the company. And that's where Accessa came from. I won't go into great detail, but essentially we wanted to find something that better reflected what we did, but what we wanted to do, what we wanted to become, but also gave us the ability to diversify further, which we knew we wanted to do over time. I'm glad we did that for sure.
Yeah. For the audience, a quick synopsis of where the name Assessa came from. It's a mashup of the words ascent and access. So we knew from the beginning we didn't just want to sell paint to manufacturers. We wanted to provide a variety of solutions, whether it be very tactical, actual physical coatings that they're going to apply in their manufacturing process, or bigger picture business solutions where we can be a part of helping them strategize about their manufacturing process and solve problems for them. Even if we don't sell them actual product, we can still be some form of solutions provider. We want to be able to grant access to that. And then Ascent, because we're not satisfied at any given point of where we are in the business. We know that there's a lot of potential out there for us to go realize. So we're constantly trying to maintain an ascent upward, obviously. So that's where the mashup of ascent and access became Assessa.
Correct. I concur.
Perfect. Glad I got that straight.
Right. So then, okay, going back, we'll fast forward now back to more recent days. Reason why I wanted to do that was because March of 2020, when everything was hitting the fan, so to speak, I guess let's relive that moment, sort of.
Do we have to?
Well, I mean, not specifically, but I just remember that, when it finally hit, like everyone heard of things coming along. You heard of this, virus spreading overseas. Then you heard of things starting to happen here in the States, and no one was really sure. Okay, what is this going to be a big deal? Is it not? What's going to happen? And then, certainly not to make light of it, but then I remember watching the Big Ten tournament right before the NCAA, and I think it was the second round or after the second round, they basically said shut it off, and then within a couple of days, they said, yeah, the NCAA tournament is not going to happen. And everyone was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
This is legit.
Yeah, I think leading up to that, all you saw on the national news was, hey, there's a mystery illness in regions in China. And, you in your daily life, you're so busy doing what you do that you hear, okay, well, China's on the other side of the world from us. Something's going on over there. That's terrible. But it's like anything in the news. You kind of hear it and then you move on. And then I remember watching the Big Ten tournament because being an IU guy, attracted to watching the other Big Ten teams. And it was Fred Hoiberg was coach in Nebraska, right?
Right.
And I don't remember who they were playing. And he just looked, you could just see every time they showed a sideline shot throughout the game.
Were they not playing IU?
They were not playing IU.
Oh.
I think they're playing maybe like Minnesota or something.
Okay.
I don't recall exactly. You could see his physical health deteriorating. And then about 3 minutes to go in the game, I don't know why I noticed this because I typically would notice such things, but he was not on the sideline anymore. And I remember saying to myself, hey, where'd he go? The coach just left the sideline. And fast forward, it turns out they took him to the hospital. He tested negative for COVID. And that was one of the very, very early moments of them doing any sort of testing. And I think he may have tested positive for influenza is what they released. So he had the flu. Obviously got a pretty bad case of it. But the bigger story wasn't just the illness, especially since it was, hey, it's not this, it's something you've heard of, but that they held both teams in the locker rooms until the test results came back. That was your very first direct experience of quarantine. Mm-hmm. But we had no idea what it was at that time. And that was, I think that was sort of the first domino, because then the broader Big Ten tournament was canceled. Other conference tournaments canceled out. The NCAA tournament was in question. The NBA, you had the guy on the recorder and all this stuff, and then you had the one game where people were actually in the stands, but they hadn't tipped off yet, and they said, hey, sorry, but the game has been canceled, and everyone's like, what the heck is going on? And then you had the Valspar Championship PGA event down in Tampa, St. Pete area. That ended up, kind of canceling out. It just, the first domino fell, and then very quickly, all the other dominoes kind of came down.
Yeah.
And that's when I think everyone was like, oh boy. And then for us, from a business perspective, It was Friday at about 4 p.m. Eastern time. So end of the day, end of the week, you're half checked out to the weekend about whatever it is, on the schedule. And this was in late March. I don't remember the exact date.
Well, it was a week after St. Patrick's Day, I believe.
It was around that time frame because there are two paths that I have a memory.
So
of.
Irish.
Very
much
much
St.
so.
Patrick's Day. Don't we look Irish?
I like Guinness. I like beef stew. I like Lucky Charms. Does that make me Irish?
No.
Only on St. Patty's Day. There are two memories I have. One is my kids' school experience and what that was like, and then our work experience. And on the work one, I remember, again, 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and we got a notice that the state of Illinois was shutting all non-essential businesses down. The problem was they had a press conference announcing this, but the actual state order wasn't out yet. So there's no definition at that time of what is an essential or non-essential business. So based on what we knew, we needed to shut down. And in our line of work, having flammable hazardous materials in storage and in production, you can't just lock a door and walk out. You've got to properly shut down equipment, properly make sure that inventory is stored correctly before you can just possibly leave for an undetermined amount of time. And so we did that very quickly because it was 4 o'clock Eastern time, 3 o'clock in Illinois. So we had very little time to do all this and really just sort of wound down operation in our Arthur, Illinois facility and our Chicago, Illinois facility. And then at maybe 7 a.m. Saturday morning, woke up to a phone call saying, hey, you don't have to shut down. You are essential. Well, overnight, the state had released its order where you could actually read the provisions and read the definitions of what everything meant. And because we serve the construction industry or a supplier to the construction industry, which was considered essential, we were needed to stay open. So come Saturday, Sunday, and then first thing Monday morning, wound operations all back up. And it just, on the fly, it seemed like every 5 minutes the news was changing and you're making decisions and unwinding decisions, rewinding decisions. That frenetic pace, I won't forget that for sure.
And like everybody else, we were learning on the fly how to do a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Teams meeting.
I mean, for my money, video conferencing is where it's at. There's just nothing more enjoyable than a good, solid 4-hour long video conference with no bathroom breaks, can't eat or drink. That's just fantastic.
But it's funny. Well, funny is not the right word, but it's amazing to think about how few video conferences people did prior to this and how many you've done now in the last 12 to 18 months. I mean, I've probably done, I don't know if I did any video conferences, quite frankly, before. If they were, I probably count on one hand, and now I should do more than that a week.
Yeah. I recall when people were too cheap to subscribe to Zoom, so they did the 45-minute freebie, and then you kind of knew because in the 44th minute they talked really fast, like, okay, goodbye, and then they would just shut off, and you're like, wait, I have more agenda to talk about. I feel like as a company, and obviously I'm biased, but I think we did a really, really good job in that time period of trying to make decisions as best we could on the information we had at the time, and tried very hard. I guess it'd be better to pull any one of our team members to find out, hey, what did you think of the communication at the time? But we tried to be as outward and open and proactive in our communication as possible, knowing that there were a lot more questions at the end of it than there were answers, but we were all in the same boat. And I will credit every one of our team members for being empathetic to the fact that there are a lot of questions and very little answers out there.
Yeah. So to that point, April was, I'll call it the dark time, because March things were shutting down and everything was just kind of setting in. Pretty much for the month of April is when most consumer-oriented things were on lockdown. I mean, you weren't leaving the house in the month of April. Most businesses had determined or found, I guess determined is the right word, whether they're essential or not. So either they're open and operating or they're shut down. And some that were deemed essential still had to shut down because then they had an outbreak internally. And so obviously sales of product had decreased quite a bit in the month of April. But the interesting thing for us, and I don't know if this is something that is a result of the Great Recession or not, but I think, especially looking back, I mean, hindsight's 2020. For us, it gave us time to pause from being so heavily in the business to take a step back, or maybe I should say take a step up and focus on the business, not just with the issue at hand, which of course consumed probably 80% of the conversation, but the 20% of, okay, at the end of 2019, we had our strategic planning session to talk about 2020, what our goals were. Those haven't totally changed, but because of the situation we're in and not knowing, is this, this month of April, is this going to be the next 6 months or what? We start talking about, okay, what do things look like now? How does this change what our plan was for 2020? What do we need to tweak and go forward with from there? I know I enjoyed that portion, and maybe it was more into the May, June area when, I'm going to say this very loosely, things got better, or started to get better at least. You had a little bit clearer picture to some extent. But I felt like it basically allowed us, working from home, to start working on some other projects that maybe otherwise we wouldn't have gotten into. And I think we're certainly going to be better off for it.
Yeah, the April 2020 was probably the depth of the pandemic from a business perspective, from a quarantine perspective, because everyone was doing it, right? All, restaurants were shutting down and trying to figure out, or as the now overused word pivot, trying to pivot to take out or carry out or delivery. Were you essential, non-essential? If you're retail, you were completely closed down. There was no traffic on the streets. The pictures of smog and pollution in large cities from a normal life day to a deep quarantine day, and suddenly you can see monuments and other historical sites from far away. You can see blue sky. I mean, the experience was, to use another often abused word, surreal, because you're just sitting there like, is this really happening? And it is. And so you just have to grasp onto that. And I think there are a lot of listeners out there that are going to, if they can look back and say, okay, let me really focus in on what was life like just over a year ago. How did I approach my work, especially if you're an entrepreneur? How did I lead my business during that time? What decisions did I make? And as you said, did it give me a chance to go from working in the business to pull myself up out of the weeds, which is way too easy to get sucked into, and work more on the business and look at our overall strategy? And is it an opportunity to take a breath and really maybe move things around a little bit? I mean, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and completely suddenly retool your business just because, in 1 month, but there are a lot of opportunities to have some improvement there that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to have if you were just in the daily grind.
Yep. I look back, and we both have mutual friends who, like so many others, the golf industry certainly profited, I guess I should say, from the situation last summer when, the quarantines weren't in place. People weren't traveling though for work. So your prototypical salesperson didn't have customers they could go see. So maybe they got up, they did a couple hours worth of work, and then it's like, well, what am I going to do? I can't travel.
Wait a minute. Isn't that just sales?
Well, maybe. Depends.
Just kidding.
But the number of rounds skyrocketed. I mean, we both know people who played 100 rounds of golf last year, which is insane. But I think for us, we put in various projects in place that are starting to pay off and starting to come to fruition now. And we'll get into those in future episodes. But I'm really glad that we did what we did, and that we looked at it the way we did in terms of, taking a step back. I mean, we really didn't have much else to do, but I'm glad the opportunity presented itself. Trying to find a silver lining in all this that will be good for us in the years to come.
Yeah, there's no doubt a lot of perspective has to be lent to the situation, that it's not lost on us the health and impact to life that COVID has had. We actually lost a loved one to COVID. Now, granted, she was advanced in age and had other health issues, but we know what that experience is like. We have had an impact on our business that was very acute at the time. So we know what that was like, seeing the numbers. That said, we also consider ourselves extremely fortunate because the industry we're in, and in manufacturing in general, the bounce back was very, very quick and very, very strong. So it's not lost upon us that there are a lot of other people out there that struggled far worse than us and continue to struggle. So we do consider ourselves fortunate and know what we have. It's I think we'll talk about this down the road, but the bounce back, the problems don't necessarily go away. They just sort of change. And in April, May of last year, it was, okay, where's the business at? Because so many of our customers are shut down or on limited operation. Now it's 180 degrees away from that. Most of our customers have backlogs, through the roof, and it's a function of there is so much demand out there, supply can't keep up. Where are we going to get materials from? The raw material shortages, the supply chain issues with logistics, transportation, kind of being the same. The challenges today are just as strong or as difficult as they were a year ago, but boy, are they entirely different. Yeah.
That's kind of a good segue into where we are now, or the past 6 months or so. It was a fairly quick rebound, which we kind of thought it might be. I mean, hence the Project Greenlight. Like, we knew that at some point we're going to come out of this, obviously, and we just didn't know how quick or to what extent, but we knew we needed to be ready when that time came. And yeah, it came. It's been incredibly robust, and now it's as you said, turned into another problem with demand outpacing supply. But then you have some supply issues that have happened. I mean, with the weather in Texas, issues with other raw material suppliers, that has really caused an issue today with scarcity of product to sell. So it's gonna make the next few months interesting. I think we're starting to see maybe a little light at the end of the tunnel for that as well, but we're not quite there yet. But it's been an interesting time, to say the least.
Yes, it has. As you noted, it'd be one thing if it was just a supply demand issue, but there's been this certainly the perfect storm, the proverbial perfect storm between demand outpacing supply from just a macroeconomic perspective, and then weather events that really hampered the supply chain of a lot of base solvents out of Texas, out of Houston. You have shortages of container ships to move product from one continent to another, bringing in whether it be raw materials or finished goods, elongating the time frame for delivery. You have raw material manufacturers, resin plants that are offline for a variety of reasons, and then so in the last, really since late March, April through now, it was one thing to have the normal price increase, sort of custom, if you will, that occurred end of year, which is not terribly uncommon, and then 2, 3, 4 months later, you're getting second, third, fourth waves of price increases on the same products. You've got base raw materials that are commodities that we've got some products that we buy that are up anywhere from, if they're only up 25% in cost, that's magic. But there are many that have more than doubled in cost. Some have gone up 300, 400% in the last 3 months. How do you how do you maintain some level of margin to be able to pay your bills without completely, just blowing up the marketplace? That's been the biggest challenge for us. And thankfully we attacked it early. Back in early March, we went through our purchasing cycle and said, okay, we're going to double all of our min-maxes. So we really started buying up inventory to ride it out. And now it's sort of fingers crossed, because the words force majeure and allocation are still pretty popular words these days. And being on allocation for some materials, hopefully we've got the stock and inventory to ride this through, because I think we're probably Q2, Q3 of seeing more of, maybe not getting worse, but probably plateauing.
Yeah. And it's across the spectrum. I mean, this isn't just on the coating side. We're seeing it on the chemical side and on the equipment side as well, both in terms of our supply of products, but then also the manufacturers that we sell to are certainly having their own issues. I think the media started highlighting the whole chip shortage, which is legit. And
trying to buy a car.
Right. And seeing how that has affected so many things. But it's not just chips anymore. It's a whole host of things. And I know we both have our own respective peer groups, and we were talking about that. And I said, don't think it's just the chip shortage and it's going to affect cars and maybe a few other things. It's a lot more widespread than that. And now we're seeing it. So yeah, these are the kinds of things that we'll be talking about on this podcast. How industry-wide issues can affect a bunch of us, and how we get through that as a team, as a community.
Yeah, I'd say, hey, entrepreneurs in America, are you ready for the Roaring 20s? Because they're here. They've been here for the last several months, believe it or not, and they've not been all-inclusive, but as time passes, more and more segments of industry for manufacturing, but service, hospitality, and so on are going to get caught in this wave. How are we going to handle it so that it does not interrupt our business? We can see you, Heather. You're crawling under the cameras, but we can still see you. Do you want me to go by director, producer? How do you want to be referred to? Consultant?
I'll take producer.
Fan club president? We have our mixologist over here, not the boozy kind of mixologist, but the guy on the ones and twos. I think I made him smile. Oh, he's laughing now. So back to the topic at hand, we are about to experience our own version of the Roaring 20s. Are we ready for it? Are you ready for it out there in podcast, audio, video land? Because it's a chance to make some hay. It's a chance to really go out there and do some good things from a business perspective and a community perspective. And we don't know how long it's going to last. So ride it while we can and enjoy it.
Yeah. And I would, on that note, I would also say that one of the other underlying themes in terms of how we came up with the title for this podcast is just kind of who we are as people. We are not cruise control kind of guys. We are all about growth, looking to expand, to diversify, do new things. And I think the past 12 months have allowed us to take another step forward in that direction. So we very much look forward to what the immediate future holds for some new things that we'll be rolling out with.
Yeah. Speaking of cruise control, does anyone have on their car that what they call adaptive cruise control? It's the worst invention ever. So you're going 75 down the highway, and on my car, I can't figure out how to deactivate it. And you come up on a car in front of you, and it automatically slows you down, but doesn't really tell you. So if you're just sort of cruising along, and then suddenly you've got cars flying by you, and you're like, man, they must be going really fast. And you look at your dash like, wait a minute, why am I only going 55 on the interstate? I just want to make a note that I hate adaptive cruise control. When I set it at 75, I want to be able to do 75.
All right.
Anyway, so
noted.
Thank you for letting me vent that out.
All right, folks, thanks for joining us for episode 1 of the Industrious Podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions of topics that we'd like to talk about and hit us up, comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit those notification bells so you can be alerted to when new episodes drop.
Subscribe to the Assessa YouTube channel. Thank you.